All right, Scott, I'll leave it up to you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just get the presentation open, sorry. Was open, but it just closed itself. Won't be a second. All right. Okay, so I'll just share my screen, check it's working. Oh, it says I can't share my screen at the moment.
Okay. Let's see.
Yep, it's good
How's
now.
that now? Okay.
Yep.
There's so many of you, Scott. I didn't know which one I was sharing with.
Okay, so hopefully you can see, I think you can see that.
Yep, very clear from here.
Cool, okay, well, I'll get started. So first of all, Lich, thanks for having me and PIEFA to talk about what I'm about to say. So basically, yeah, at Barker over the past 12 years, we've kind of been working on ag and trying to increase the interest in agriculture. I think all of us online that know about agriculture know that there's a very large amount of jobs in agriculture and not enough people graduating and going on to ag degrees at uni. And so really, that's what I'm kind of here to talk about tonight, about what we've done at Barker, and also a little bit about some PhD work that I'm doing that kind of dovetails pretty well into that, into I guess what we've been doing at school. So I called this untapped potential, the neglected urban interest in secondary agriculture, because I think you know, in Australia, 90% of people roughly live in urban areas, and yet I think we seem to focus on kind of rural students are going to kind of fill ag jobs, and we can't really fill the number of jobs there are in ag with 10% of the population. So I think people usually assume that urban students aren't interested or don't know, you know, how to get urban students interested in agriculture. And so I think really that's what I'm here to talk about tonight. So this is a kind of a brief summary of, or it's basically a talk I gave at UNE in December last year. And so it's which kind of dovetails into the PhD work that I'm doing. So first of all, the issues in agriculture are that there's about 6 jobs per graduate at university. And so that's a stat that we get told from Sydney Uni all the time. Professor Prattley at CSU also has done a lot of work in that area, which I'll talk about a bit later. And so there's roughly 5 to 6 jobs, something like 6,000 jobs for uni graduates each year from ag degrees. And there's only about 1,000 or so coming out of university each year. So there's a massive demand that's not being met at this stage. And generally those jobs are being filled by other people who have no particular ag background. Maybe they have science background, but no ag background. And so they're kind of being filled, they are being filled, but they're not being filled by the ideal people who have a background in ag. And so there's a lot of choice for people that do come out of ag degrees at uni, and a lot of jobs. And so roughly in Australia, 85 to 90% of people live in urban areas, and about 3/5 of Australians live in one of the 5 cities, of course, one of our 5 large cities. And so we can't just get the remaining people to do all the ag jobs. Like, we need to have urban people in agriculture doing the ag jobs. And there's a lot of ag jobs in urban areas. In fact, 50% or so, 50 to 60% of jobs in agriculture are in urban areas, which we'll talk about in a sec as well. And I think agriculture at the moment in Australia really is just attracting the kids and the students who already like agriculture. So they're the ones that you could probably get up at curriculum night, at subject selection night, and you could say, don't do ag, and they'd probably still do it. You know, that I think we're attracting the base level of interest, because I think there's a lot more interest out there than we're getting a hold of at the moment. And so I think part of the reason is agriculture has a bit of a perception issue, especially in schools. I think it's seen as a bit of a bludge in a lot of cases, or a non-academic subject. And so I think that leads to a lot of students who would otherwise try it and be interested in it, not choosing it. And so, as I'll show you in a sec, the HSC numbers in ag across the state and Australia actually are really at their lowest ever ebb at the moment. But the good news is that there is, and this is really what we've seen at Barker, and I kind of understand, having grown up in Sydney myself, and you know, never having lived outside Sydney. I've travelled plenty, but have never lived outside Sydney, so I grew up in a similar environment to the students that I'm teaching. And so really there is this inherent desire for urban people to be connected to the paddock to plate stuff. I think, you know, if you look at the success of shows like MasterChef and those types of shows, people really want to be connected to the paddock to plate aspect, and they want to know about their food, and where their foods come from is really important these days, and more so than ever. But I think there's kind of structural problems where kind of urban people are cut off from that, despite, you know, against their wishes. Like, they haven't chosen to do that. It's just how things are. And so I think when you present that paddock to plate kind of aspect, and you engage students and even parents in the paddock to plate and what happens behind their food, they're really interested in it, especially urban people. And so as well, I've always noticed, I think among students, yeah, even year 9 age, year 10, 11 and 12, they have this, usually have this inherent desire for, you know, having a career that is purposeful and really doing something that will change, you know, will make a difference. And so I think agriculture has that. And we all know that, you know, agriculture really can fulfill that maybe more than many other things, or maybe more than anything else. So careers of purpose, I think, are really good way to engage students in what is in agriculture. And so just quickly, this is the year 12 canister across Australia. And so this is thanks to Dave Randall, who's on this Zoom call for this data. But basically, this is showing the number of candidates sitting in the year 12 HSC in New South Wales from 1990 through to kind of 2018 or so. So about 30 years worth. And you can see it's gone from about 2,500 drop down, and we're kind of maybe have just seen the curve turn slightly up a bit with about 1,300 in 2018, and I think 1,600 last year, but it's still kind of at a roughly historical low, and that's obviously not anywhere near enough. However, New South Wales is by far and away, I guess, the standout in Australia in terms of year 12 graduates from agriculture. So you see over this side, New South Wales has about 1,300, 1,400 students, depending on the year, graduating from a year 12 agriculture degree, and then kind of drops off from there. So 642 in Queensland in 2018, Victoria's quite low. 2018 there was none in Tasmania, South Australia, Northern Territory combined 71, and Western Australia 110. And to give you an idea about this, like this year we have 70 students in year 12 at Barker. And so that's kind of giving you an idea of what, you know, what we've done and how it is elsewhere in Australia. I think we can do better as a country. And so that's 2,400 students basically in total across Australia. And so at the same time, roughly we've kind of had this change in enrolments in agriculture at Barker. So from before I started, a number of years before I started, 2008, sorry, there was about 50 students. We only offer ag from year 9 to 12 as an elective at school. And there was only 50 students across those 4 years. So it was at a point where it almost got shut down by the school because there was not enough students to actually run classes. And so it got very, very close to being shut down. Anyway, as I'm about to talk to you about, previous head of department, Ali Arnott, she kind of really changed the focus of it to be much more science-based and more academic focus. And so since then, basically that decision, our numbers have kind of gone up significantly, and you can see like just I guess a steady increase over time. And in the last couple of years, we've gone up to 360 students this year from 50 students 12 years ago. So that's what's happened. And so basically, I'm just here to show you what we've done, really. But I'll give you a bit more of an idea about 12 years ago. So when it was about 50 students. So we basically had, like I said, 4 classes across 4 years. So you get one small class in each year at that point. And really part of the problem, and I think this is the case in a lot of places, a lot of schools, that ag is, can be perceived as a bit of a bludge subject, maybe a non-academic subject, where parents think, oh, look, you know, in year 9 and 10, you should choose things that are interesting, that are fun. But then by the time you get to year 11 and 12, you really need to get serious and kind of, you know, that's not a subject for, you know, that time. Like it's a bit of a waste, probably what students or parents would often say. And so back then we had an ag club and we were showing cattle and other prac activities. We kept animals permanently on site, and ag was very close to being closed down by the school. I'll move on from that in a second, but to give you a bit of a background about our students, all of our students pretty much are from the North Shore and Northern Beaches. We have about 60 boarders at Barker out of 2,500 students. So it's, you know, we only have boarders from year 10 to 12, and out of our 350 or so students doing ag, there's only a handful of them, you know, in one handful doing ag. So typically boarders don't do ag as much as, like as a percentage. They're less likely to do ag than any other students. And as I mentioned, ag is fully voluntary at Barker. And so for those outside Sydney, to give you an idea of where we are, we're 22, we're up here where the arrow is, but in Hornsby, we're about 22 kilometres from the centre of Sydney, or from Harbour Bridge roughly. And we're kind of on the upper North Shore. So it doesn't take long to drive, and you're kind of on the M1 heading up to Newcastle out of Sydney, but we're definitely thoroughly urban. And this is a shot of our school down the bottom here. And you can see the city in the background. And basically, you know, obviously in Sydney, there's a lot of national parks heading through Sydney. So it's why it's quite leafy and the kind of North Shore through here. But this is very urban. I mean, you can see the high rises down here that are right almost surrounding school these days. And so this is an example on the top of our science building. We installed this FarmBot, which it's kind of finished being installed now, but this is just a progress shot from a little while ago. And you can see that, you know, there's high-rise buildings surrounding the school. So we're thoroughly an urban school. And this is the kind of, this is just to give you a bit of context about what we are surrounded by and what the kids are, you know, growing up in, I guess. And so, as I mentioned, in about 2008, the previous head of department, Ali Arnott, decided to take a different approach to ag because it was almost going to be closed down. And she has kind of or she had, when she was at school, had a science background, was teaching biology and that kind of thing. And so she really took it down a different path of treating it as a science. And so teaching it in the same way that earth or biology, earth and environment in New South Wales, or biology, chemistry, etc., were seen by students as a rigorous academic subject, such as a science. And so that really, I think, started to change the perception of it. And so we went on from keeping animals permanently to just keeping them for 1 or 2 terms. And I remember when I was interviewed for the job and heard that's what was being done, I was like, oh, that's really different. Like, I'd never heard of that before. I went to a different school and we had, you know, you just had animals all the time. But now I would never go back to having animals. For what we're doing, you keep animals when you need them. You do the stuff you need to do with the students for the outcomes. And then after that, they kind of start to get over them a bit, and you just end up wasting so much time looking after the animals, I think, when you don't need to. And so we really get them in, have them for a couple of terms, and then we get them off and process, and the students get to buy them back processed if they want to. We also moved to no showing of animals. And I think this is an important thing too. Basically, in a lot of schools, I think when animals are shown at, you know, cattle or sheep or whatever, often on the school Facebook page or the way that things are promoted, they see ag, students see agriculture equals walking a cow around a paddock. And I'm talking about the students who aren't doing ag. Obviously the students who are doing ag have a more accurate impression of agriculture, but I think the ones that aren't doing ag, and they're the ones we want to try and attract, see agriculture as just, you know, showing animals and walking a cow around a paddock. And so I think, you know, not showing animals is a really crucial thing for us. I think if we introduced the showing of animals again, we would lose students, like we would drop numbers for sure. So we're not doing that. Excursions are, we go on a 3-day excursion with year 10, 11 and 12 to Bathurst each year. And so they're thoroughly tied to academic outcomes. So we're seeking to kind of cover dot points as we go and, you know, make sure it's thoroughly academic in its nature. And so I think what we've done is we've changed the reputation within the school of ag, and it's not, why would you do ag? You know, when I was at school, I used to get the refrain all the time, why would you do ag if you're not going to be a farmer? Or are you going to be a farmer if you're doing ag? Like, and that's not the case. So I think we've changed the reputation now to be more like, why wouldn't you choose ag, rather than why would you? And I think that's led to our numbers. And so, as you saw, we're quite an urban campus, so we have quite a few constraints on our, in doing ag, I guess, when you have to have practical areas and plots and that kind of thing. And so we have quite a small area, but we've had to do things a bit differently to most people. So having a glass house on the roof of the science building is what we used to have. It's kind of getting moved around at the moment. Aquaponics as well is another feature. So we're really trying to do things that are relevant to city students. We've got raised garden beds around the school, and this is really important, I think, in students seeing agriculture around them. In a lot of schools, in most schools actually, the agriculture plot is kind of down the back, out of the way. Most students never go to it. It's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I think really agriculture is part of everyone's life every day, including urban students and parents. And so I think really that you need to put agriculture around the school in places that are visible, and it needs to be part of students every day. And so that might include building edible gardens and things like that too, that students in ag use. And I'd like to term that kind of normalizing ag and making it just normal. It's not some weird thing that's out of the way and done by someone else in the bush, but it's part of my life, and it's in the playground, and I see it. And so it's not something done by someone else anymore. About to talk about strategy and how we do things, but basically we've got 6 ag teachers and an ag assistant at Barker, and so there's 6 of us that teach ag, either full load or part load. We also teach, there's a bit of science and biology and various things in there that the 6 of us teach. And then we also have Gunnar, who's our ag assistant, 3 days a week. And so basically the strategy that we've been following is for the last 10, 12 years. And really, in a sense, we've partly stumbled upon this in a way, like we've done stuff and realized it works, and we've kind of kept pushing down that path. I don't think we set out from the very beginning to go, we know how to do this, let's just do this, this and this, and it'll work. We didn't really, it didn't really start like that, but I think we've just kind of done things that seem to make sense, and they've worked. And so really what we've been trying to do is appeal to all students. We're not aiming at the students who already like ag. As I mentioned, a lot of students, students who do ag in a lot of places, you get up at curriculum night, subject selection night, and just say, don't do ag. And they'd still choose it because they're just really already convinced that they should do it, and they're interested in it. And so we're not aiming at getting those students. We're really aiming at getting the ones who wouldn't have done ag otherwise. And so we want to make it relevant to city students, which of course is about 99% of our students at school. And so making it relevant to those students is going to be stuff that they have every day, or in the future they will have, and making that relevant, making agriculture relevant to them in that way. So we focus on a bit on alternate enterprises in year 10, where they get to choose they get a bit of choice of products that they might choose to look into. Viticulture, winemaking, grape growing, which is obviously important for later on, I guess, to have an understanding of grape growing and winemaking. And then also there's a lot of wineries around the Sydney region as well that are not far away. We're also kind of in the process of trying to begin a unit on coffee production, or a bit of coffee production stuff, because that's very relevant to probably almost everyone every day. And then basically out of that, our goal is for 90% of the students in agriculture to say that it's one of their top 2 favorite subjects. And I think we've done that, as you'll see shortly. And so basically the pathways that students kind of come into with some kind of interest in and then go off to after they've finished ag at school are these kind of things. And I've made these bubbles, I guess, the size, proportional to how many students we have that are interested in these things. So I'd say probably 60% of our students are really interested in the science, and they have a science background, and they do other sciences. They come to ag and they want to know about the science. That's what really, they're passionate about. And they then go on and do ag science degrees, rural science. They do sciencey related stuff if they go to uni. Another probably 30% these days are interested in the business, the economics kind of side of things. And so they'll be doing legal studies, business studies at the school, as well as ag. And then they'll go on to uni and do food and agribusiness, or just straight agribusiness subjects or stuff like that. And so that's probably about 30%. And then maybe these days about 10% of students are interested in the engineering robotics side of things, and they, you know, they come with that those kind of interests. They want that out of ag, and then they go and do those kind of things at uni. So we really, we're not just teaching a science subject, but we need to think that we have those students with us that are business and economics, have an interest in that. Those students that have an interest in robotics and technology, we also have those students as well. So we need to consider those in how we deliver ag. And the good thing is it's not just a science, it's not just about business, it's not just about technology, but it's a crossover of all of them. And so tailoring to that is important because we get students from all of those areas. So part of our strategy is getting younger years involved in visits. So, you know, getting the kindergarten to the K to 6 kind of age group involved, even though they can't study agriculture as a subject yet, of course. Just getting them thinking about it. And what I said earlier about normalizing ag and just making it a normal part of life, that they don't even think it's someone else does it. It's out the back, like it's just around them and they're kind of engaged in it. And so I think that's been a really important aspect for us. Another part of our strategy, I think, is heavily promoting the future. And so I remember being at school myself, and you'd have subjects that just felt like they were from the past and they weren't really talking about the future, or they just felt like they were kind of almost dying as a subject. And when I had that at school, I just felt, I don't want anything to do with that. Like I'm not going to be in a job for another 10 years or something. And, you know, then I'm going to be working till I'm, you know, for another 50 years, something like that. I want to know about the future. And so, we've really focused, I think, on promoting the opportunities in agriculture, and also a lot of, you know, the technologies and the way of making things better and more efficient and more effective. And that's, I think students respond well to that. Also, we've been trying to inspire people having a future in agriculture. So we took, as I'll show you a little bit later, we had a New Zealand trip 2 years ago. We took as a voluntary trip for students. And we took 70 students in year 10, 11 on this voluntary New Zealand ag trip. And that was out of about 180 students. So we hit the maximum capacity of 70 out of 180 that were studying ag in year 11 and 12. And sorry, year 11 and 12 that year. And so, yeah, that was really helpful. And I think the point of that is when students look back, you know, in 10 years, 20 years, they say, well, why did you get into agriculture? And they look back and hopefully that trip might have been that thing for them that they said, oh, it was that trip that really made me realize all the opportunities that were there in agriculture. And unfortunately, we were going to do a Tasmania trip this year, a 10-day voluntary trip in September holidays, but of course that's been cancelled, and we'll hopefully reschedule that for next year. We also promote, as I mentioned earlier, jobs with meaning and purpose. So, you know, in agriculture, if you are doing plant breeding and you can you can breed some new variety of rice that has some extra drought tolerance, you know, you might be able to save 100,000 people from starvation or something like that. There's so many opportunities like that in agriculture. And I think, like I said earlier, students really respond well to that because they really want to do those things. And the social consciousness aspect is really important. The last thing here is progression of academic focus. So we want agriculture to be seen in year 9 and 10 down here as kind of like, you know, fun, not too strenuous academically, but it's fun and it's interesting and it's enjoyable. And then we want it to be seen as it gets, you know, progresses to year 11 and 12. We want it to be seen as more challenging, and we want it to be basically seen as on par with a subject such as biology. You know, students know, you know, biology is not the hardest science. They wouldn't say that it's the equivalent of, say, physics or chemistry, but biology has a lot of content, and it is quite, you know, it's academically, it's very challenging. And so we want agriculture to be seen on par with that. Like we want them to see that year 11 is a big step up from year 10 academically, and then the year 12 is an even bigger step up. And, you know, sometimes students do drop ag because they say, oh, it's too hard or it's getting too hard. And you know, like I'm okay with that because I think we need it to be seen as hard, and we need to challenge the students to do really well academically because that spurs them on, and then we'll get the brightest people in agriculture, which we really need. And so with this strategy, we'd been doing this for a few years. This study by a group called YOUTHINSIGHT in Western Australia put out this report in 2017 of young people in agriculture and developing interests. And this was kind of a pretty incredible thing to read because we'd found, you know, what they'd put into data we knew, like we found that at school really clearly, but then they'd kind of done a survey and found it and had data on it. And so that was really good, exciting to read, I guess. And, you know, in the objectives here, it says it's hypothesized that the appeal of the sector, agriculture, is low due to a misunderstanding of what a career in agriculture offers, and the technological innovation that's taking place within the sector and the new careers that are possible are not being communicated to students. In particular, urban students are unlikely to realize that the majority of roles in the agriculture sector occur after the farm gate. And that's exactly what we'd been doing at school. And that's what had led, I think, in large part to our significant increase in numbers. And so, like I said, seeing this in a study was really important. And I'd encourage you to have a read of this if you haven't seen it before. But as part of this study, this table was really interesting too. And it says, these are the things up the top here that young people are looking for in a career. So it's of high importance up here and low importance down here. But this side is also things that have a low association with agriculture. And so things like job security, high salary, lots of roles, growing industry that's a sustainable, fun environment, all these things are really important to young people, but they're also the things that have a low association with agriculture. And that's a shame because they're all things that agriculture offers. And I think we all know that when we're in the industry, but people outside the industry don't know that. And we'd been promoting this stuff for years. And that's what led to our, part of what led to our numbers, I think, is that kind of idea. And so the last thing from this study is that I want to show you is, so reasons against considering an agriculture career in this study. The number one reason was, I'm not from a farming family or background. And then students automatically write off being in agriculture. And over here as well, the crux of the challenge, working in agriculture is seen as not normal. And most teenagers want to be normal. And so, you know, that goes back to what I said earlier about normalizing agriculture. Agriculture needs to be normalized because it is part of everyone's life. And so people need to see it as a viable career path because there are 6 jobs per graduate in it. And so, and 50 to 60% of them are based in cities. So we need to push that image, which is what we've been doing. And so out of that, I guess in the last couple of years, we put together this mission and values statement. And I think our mission here is to engage and educate students and the wider community in the science of food and fiber production in Australia and also globally. So we don't want students to just focus on Australia, but we want them to see the whole global picture. And many of them end up going and working overseas at different points, students we've had leave in the past. And so we want to inspire students to play a role in sustainably feeding and clothing the world. And so the ways that we kind of see everything through, I think, is we want to be future focused. We want to be consumer oriented. So I think focused on what the consumer wants is really important in agriculture. Globally minded, so thinking about the big picture rather than just our small little area. Also sustainable, of course, is really important. And as a subject, we want to be relevant to everyone and enjoyable for all. So, you know, I was speaking to a girl last night on board. I was on boarding duty, and she said, you know, I chose Ag in Year 10 and it wasn't my thing, so I didn't keep going. And I was like, that's fantastic. Like, she gave it a go. And that's, I think, what we get at school. We get so many kids having a go, and some of them will go, it's not my thing, but she really enjoyed it. And, you know, she could see that if it was her thing, she'd definitely keep doing it. And so that's really great. Like, hearing that is really what we're after. And so we want to make it enjoyable for all students, even if ag's not a future career for them. And so as part of that, we said we wanted to also educate the community. So we're not just about changing the reputation amongst students, but as I'll show you in a second, to even get students in a subject, you have to kind of have parents that are willing to let them do a subject and see it as worthwhile. And so we started this thing a few years ago called Agriculture After Dark. We're still kind of working it out how well it works and who to invite and, you know, when to do it. And, you know, it's obviously hard at the moment with COVID and that kind of thing. But we had a forum in the evening about 7 p.m. At school, and we got Saxon Wright, who founded Pablo and Rusty's Coffee, who some of you might know, but he's well known on the North Shore. They've had cafes and stuff around, so all the parents kind of mostly know, you know, Pablo and Rusty's, which is his company. And so he came and spoke. He's got a science background. He came and spoke all about founding a coffee company and going overseas and sourcing beans and being a judge in international coffee competitions. And that was really great evening. We had about 100 or so people turn up to that, lots of parents, teachers. students as well. And so that's really about changing the reputation of agriculture and making them connect, you know, things that are in their everyday life to agriculture and show the importance of agriculture. So we're kind of continuing to work on that. But I want to tell you briefly how we kind of promote the subject to students at curriculum night. And I think this is important because this is like one of the key times when we see parents and students and they're making a decision. It's coming up in a few weeks. This year it's being done online, of course. We can't have anything in person, but this is kind of the way that we promote the subject to parents and students. And so basically this is the first slide that we would normally have in our curriculum night presentation. And so it's really important that we point out from the very beginning, if there's one thing that they take away, that agriculture is not all about being a farmer. As I mentioned earlier, we talk about the future of jobs and the present jobs, even in ag, the growth areas are in the science jobs, technology, business and finance. And about 60% of jobs in agriculture are city-based, and only 20% of jobs in agriculture are actually on a farm. Whereas I think people see, you know, a farm as being what agriculture is, but we need to change that image. And so as I mentioned earlier, a key important thing we need to tell and inform people of is that there's 6 jobs per graduate in agriculture. And so we put that as very prominent in our curriculum night presentation. The next bit before we go in to talk about what they actually do is we talk about what are the challenges. So as I mentioned before about students wanting to do something that's meaningful, they want to do something that, you know, and we tell them why it's a challenge. So for example, you know, in the next 30 years or so, there's going to be 2 billion extra people in the world. We're going to need to double our food production. There's going to be climate change and land degradation. Already in Australia, there's less land area used for agriculture than there was previously by a slight amount. So we're not increasing the area. We just have to become more efficient. And so basically the students that we have are the ones that are going to go on and come up with some of the solutions to these problems. And I think students want to be part of the solution in this. So that's an important part of the promotion. We also then talk about what they actually do. So, you know, in year 9 or year 10 or year 11, what they actually do. And I've kind of skipped over that bit, but basically over the last couple of years, we've tried to really, over the last 10 years, really, we've tried to focus on the academic side and making it seen as, and to be academically challenging, which it can be. And I think we've also structured all the content according to what dot point it is, and every single syllabus dot point the students do has the past 10 years of HSC questions on them. So they can, at the end of learning about all the content, they'll do practice past paper questions either at school or at home, and you know, just get used to what are the things I might get asked about this in an exam. And so as part of that, we created a YouTube channel, and there's basically, I think in the ag syllabus in New South Wales in year 12, there's about 92 dot points, syllabus dot points. And we've created a 15 to 30 minute video on every one of them. So it's kind of talking students through the dot points. So if they need to revise at home, they didn't quite get something, or they need to revise for an exam or whatever, that's there for them. And so encouraging students who want to do well is really important in agriculture. The next thing is we created these things called Band 6 characteristic sheets. And I've had the privilege of doing HSC judging for the last couple of years where the cutoff between like Band 5 and Band 6 is determined. So for people outside New South Wales, a Band 6 is like a 90% plus in the HSC, and Band 5 is kind of 80 to 90. And so the actual cutoff is determined by the judges after the marking. And basically, that is like, it's really, we as judges sit down and it takes us ages to work out what does it mean that they have a thorough understanding of this or whatever. So what we did a few years ago, about a year and a half ago, is we sat down and said, what do you actually need to do or need to know and be able to show to get a Band 6, so a 90% plus in the HSC. And so we divided up into our topics as animal production, plant production, sustainability, product study. And then we said, for these dot points, which match up with the worksheets, which I just talked to you about, for these dot points, these are the kind of topics that they're grouped as. And here's what a student that gets a Band 6 can basically do. Like they can show this, they can show that. So it's trying to help encourage students to really do well academically. And students are kind of hungry, I think, usually they want to do well, and making things clear for them to be able to do well is really important. I think it helps them out a lot and it kind of it just clarifies things and gets stuff out of the way so that they can just focus on the concepts and do as well as they can. And so as a result, we also promote this, by the way, what I've just been saying, we talk about this at Curriculum Night. We say, this is available to you. This is here to help you, as well as us. And then one of the last things we do at Curriculum Night is showing previous HSC results. And I think I'm a big believer in results begetting results. So good results lead to further good results. I think that when you show that students like them in a year ahead or 2 years ahead did really well, and then you go, oh, I could do well too if I want to do that that well. And so they see that, and I think that means you start getting students who are stronger at agriculture deciding to take the subject because they can see that they can actually do well. And so part of that is kind of saying, you know, we've got 85% of students getting 80% or above. We've got a student getting 11th in the state, 10th in the state, 2nd in the state last year, 1st in the state, 35% of students getting 90% above, 90% or more in the HSC. That's really important in getting intelligent, bright students who we need in agriculture to go, yeah, like it's not a bludge, it's actually a really good subject academically that I can do really well in. And so that's really important. Lastly, we finished the curriculum night off with what some past students are doing, because I think one of the big problems in agriculture is students can't see a path ahead. Like they just don't know what it leads to other than being a farmer, you know? So we have to show other things really clearly. And so we talk about vet science, you know, students, we have 3 or 4 students each year going and doing vet science after school, ag science, agribusiness, animal behavior sciences, ag engineering, food security, and a whole range of things. And so Will here finished in 2011 at Barker. He went and created this robot after doing an ag engineering degree for swarm farm robotics. And that's kind of just sprays weeds, just detects weeds and sprays that. So we say that's an example for the technology students. You know, there's a little video here we play as well, just showing it in action. This is Matt Nevison, a student we had finish in 2016. And he, in his, I think, 3rd year of university, he got chosen as one of the 10 future young leaders for the Evoke Ag Conference in Melbourne. And so talking to students about that, like you could be here in a couple of years, I think is really important in getting really intelligent students to do agriculture. We also thought it was quite hard to show urban jobs. There's not really many places or anywhere where urban jobs in agriculture are really shown clearly, and that kind of pathway is shown. So we created this video, and I'll turn the sound down, but we called it Beyond Barker Agriculture. And so Ash was a guy who finished Barker in 2013, and he went and did the 1st year of food and agribusiness degree at Sydney Uni. And as part of that, we went and filmed this kind of 5-minute clip, which is on our YouTube channel. But at the curriculum night, we just show a little snippet like this. And we filmed him at uni doing food and agribusiness. And then I'll skip ahead a little bit, but we also filmed him. He did some work in the Solomon Islands as part of his degree. And so we showed that because that's part of a lot of ag degrees, is doing work overseas. And we also, I missed a bit there. We also showed him, he did an internship at Four Pines Brewery, missed it, here it is, at the Four Pines Brewery in Brookvale in Northern Beaches in Sydney. And so showing that these, you know, ag career options that are urban is really important. And so students can actually see that as something they could do. The other thing we did is the New Zealand trip, which I mentioned, and I think this video is not working. Oh, it is working now. So we did this trip and we did this promo video just showing all the things we were going to do. And like I said, we had 70, we were full. We had 70 students out of 180 potential students go on this trip. And that was 2 years ago. Yeah, it was a fantastic trip. And we were also going to go on the Tasmania trip this year, but unfortunately we had to cancel that. And so that was going to involve a whole pile of different things in Tasmania. And as I mentioned, these type of trips are really about what you want to get out of them is students go on them and they think, yeah, like agriculture is something I want to do. You know, I want to, and hopefully that they're inspired to do something in agriculture. And the goal really is that at the end of it, you know, 10 or 20 years down the track, they say that was the thing that really made me want to do, you know, something in agriculture. So this was our little promo video, and yeah, unfortunately it might be 2021 now that happens. So anyway, back to finish off this section in terms of numbers. Basically, yeah, numbers have gone from kind of in year 10, about 10 or so up to 130 we now have in year 10. It's the equal biggest elective with commerce. We have about 110 in year, 107 in year 11 this year, up from about 10 or 12 in 2008. And then in year 12, we've gone from about 10 or so kind of up to 70 in this year's HSC. And the good thing about this is that 30% out of the 70 this year, around 30% I've already spoken to want to do agriculture at university next year. And so that's something around, 2 years ago we had 21 students out of our 57 went on to ag degrees at university. This year there's going to be in the high 20s, 25 to 30 students out of our 70 that are going to do ag degrees at university. And I actually looked yesterday, out of our top 10 students, in terms of marks, the top 10, there's about 7 of those top 10 that want to go to university and do ag. And so that's really important because we need, the best and brightest minds in agriculture. And so that's really encouraging. And it's probably my favorite stat there. And so that was something I already showed you with total enrollments kind of going from about 50 to 360 over the last 12 years. To give you an idea of percentage, we have large year groups, about 360 in each year group in year 10, 11, and 12. So, you'd expect large numbers then, but to give you an idea of percentage, year 9, about 24% of year 9's doing agriculture. Year 10, we've got about 38% of year 10 doing agriculture. Year 11's 30%, and year 12 is 21%. And these are urban students. Like I said, they're students that have grown up on the northern beaches, on the North Shore, and that kind of thing. And so they're choosing to do agriculture. And so note down the bottom here, our earth and environment subjects at school has done a fantastic job for a long time, and they get about 90 to 100 students sit in the HSC every year. So there's no reason why we can't get 100 students sit in the HSC. And, this 107 here in year 11, we should have next year over 100 students sit the HSC, because we'll probably lose a couple there, but I would expect us to have 100 sit the HSC in 2021. And that, to give you context from before, there's about 1,400 in the state and about 2,400 in Australia. So next year we should have, if there's, similar numbers to normal in Australia, 2,400, we should have about 5% of the students in year 12 studying ag at Barker next year. So the last thing I want to say about this is parent satisfaction is really important, because our parents are highly involved in their son or daughter's education. And so basically that means that in some cases they're a bit of a gatekeeper, especially when you get to year 11 and 12. If they're not convinced it's a worthwhile subject, then their son or daughter may not end up doing it. So this is parent satisfaction of agriculture over the years. So 2015, 2019. So agriculture in year 10 is the #1 subject out of about 30 or so subjects. We're #1 at the top. And also 2019, year 10 parents rated us #1 subject for parent satisfaction as well. And then this is year 12, and this is probably even more, I'm even happier with this, because like I said, it has to be seen as a viable subject, like academically in year 11 and 12, especially. Parents are happy with their son or daughter choosing a subject that's just fun and, interesting in year 9 and 10. But when they get to year 11 and 12, the rubber starts to hit the road, and parents are a bit more, look, you need to be serious, and you need to choose things based on what you want to do. And it needs to be not a waste of 2 units. And so having parents thinking positively about agriculture is really important in year 12. And so 2015, we were the 7th subject here. And this is out of 35, 40 subjects that we offer at school. So there's another 30 subjects which aren't listed here. And then over here in 2019, we've moved up to 5th. And this is kind of like 95% parent satisfaction. And so other thing of note is these subjects above, unnamed subjects, but they are all smaller candidature subjects. So like an example is Extension English. They have really small candidatures. That's just the nature of those subjects. And so I'd say that we're the first, I'd claim that we're the first kind of big subject listed there. So that's really encouraging. I also invited on 2 students. One of them might have had to go to a dinner, Ben, but Georgie should be here. So I think, Luciana, you might have to unmute their microphones, but I just wanted to, I thought I'd ask them along because they're fantastic examples of, students that have grown up in Sydney. They didn't have a background in agriculture, but now they're kind of in the top 10 out of 70 students. They're in the top 10 easily. And in fact, Georgie's coming equal first, and Ben's very close behind. And so basically what I wanted to show you is kind of like what is it that got them interested in agriculture, or what are they actually interested in about agriculture? What do they want to do in the future? So hopefully, I think Benny's still there. Ben might have had to go. I think Georgie should be there. Hi, Georgie.
Hi.
Can't hear you yet.
Hello.
Hey, can you hear? I think I can hear you now.
Yeah.
How you going?
Good, thank you.
So I've just got a couple of questions, but you grew up in Sydney and you've lived in Sydney your whole life. Did you have any experience in ag when you were growing up?
No, I didn't have really any experience at all. Like, I'd been to a handful of family friends, farms in my life, but I'd never really known what agriculture was or what it was about before coming to Barker.
And is Ben there? I'm not sure, Ben. I think he had to go, but he can pipe up if he's there. So why did you choose ag at school? Like, was year 10 the first time you did ag, Georgie? Like, why did you choose it?
Yeah, I started Barker in year 10, and that was the first time I chose it as one of my electives. And honestly, Mr. Graham did a really good subject selection presentation. And the practical component in year 10 of land production and having the opportunity to go to the ag plots and interact and care for the sheep and cows was really interesting. And it was unlike any other subject I'd done really before.
Yeah, cool. And so what's made you think about, actually in ag at school, like what do you like the most? What aspects of agriculture kind of really fascinate you?
I really enjoy like the science side of agriculture and learning about how plants and animals grow, develop and reproduce. And I'm especially interested in the biotechnology aspect we learnt about. And also really crosses over really nicely with my other subjects like biology.
Yeah. So you're thinking about, you've been tossing up like biomedical science and stuff like that, and ag and biology, that's your thing. You're thinking now about doing, rural science, something like that at uni. What makes you want to do that? And then what do you see yourself doing? Have you thought what you see yourself doing down the track with that yet? Or?
Yeah, well, I think after doing agriculture for 3 years, I've really realized the value and the place that agriculture has, not only like around me, but around the whole world. And studying agriculture, especially this year, I think has really fostered a passion in me for agriculture. And I think that the best way I can contribute to my society and make a difference is by getting involved in an agriculture career. And I'm planning on doing rural science at UNE next year. And ideally, I'd love to pursue a career in biotechnology or genetic engineering with agriculture applications. Yeah,
cool. So I think Ben's gone, but basically I chose Ben and Georgie as well because Georgie's kind of more the science side of things and loves that side of things, and then Ben's a bit more businessy commerce side of things. And so completely different interests in a lot of ways, but agriculture is the kind of common ground there. And so yeah, I mean, it'd be great if anyone wants to ask questions at the end to ask questions of Georgie as well. But Georgie's, like I said, coming equal first out of 70 at the moment. So he's phenomenally gifted in agriculture, and indeed has got like 100% in a couple of our assessments in year 12 so far. So that's not easy to do, incredibly gifted. So thanks, Georgie. And you'll be here for questions if people want to ask at the end too.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So yeah, unfortunately Ben had a cadet dinner at school, so he had to go. I went a little bit over time. So moving on to this little bit, we're almost finished here before we take questions, but the way forward, I think in agriculture, we need 6 times more graduates out of university. And I think promoting degrees to students who haven't studied ag at school is not going to fill that gap. Each year, we have a few students that go to ag at university and didn't study ag at school, but I'm literally talking 1 or 2 maybe. And students aren't going to go on to do ag degrees at university if they didn't do ag at school in those kind of numbers. So really, we need to attract urban students to ag degrees because that's where the absolute majority of our population is. And I think at the moment, most of the focus in schools is really on the 20% of jobs which are kind of more on farm or rural. And that's at least what students perceive it as. And maybe not students in ag, but the students that aren't doing ag, who we're not really reaching, I think see agriculture as, you know, it's all about working on a farm, it's working in a rural area, and that's just not the case. And so we really need to change that. And I think urban students, you know, such as Georgie and anyone else, respond well to the focus on the other 80%, which obviously is the most, is more than the majority of jobs. And I think agriculture really needs to be academically rigorous, and it needs to compete against biology and earth and environment and chemistry, and also business and legal studies to get the best and brightest minds as an industry in Australia. And I think that's possible. Like, I think we've managed to do that. They're the kind of subjects that we have students who are interested in those things and do agriculture often as well. And so we have to kind of get those students, because agriculture needs the best and brightest minds. And so I think these last 2 points, we really, to meet the needs of graduates, we really need to have agriculture front of mind to students when they're thinking about their career, because it is really important. And it's only going to happen if we have students studying ag in year 11 and 12. And so kind of dovetailing straight off to the next thing from that, this is not an actual end slide, but I've got a Barker Ag. I'm taking off my Barker Agriculture cap and putting on my CSU cap for a second. And if anyone's watching from CSU, feel free to send me a cap, because I haven't got one yet. But basically I'm doing a PhD now part-time, which I started this year. And it kind of is just really following on from that. So this bit's only very brief, because it kind of is self-evident, I guess, from what I've been talking about. But basically the working title of my thesis at the moment is Increasing Student Enrolments and Engagement in Secondary School Agriculture through Improved Subject Reputation and Increased Academic Rigor. And so I've already talked about the reasons why we need to have that happen. And I think, you know, historically low numbers in agriculture. So I basically started this year the PhD part-time. And some of you might know Professor Jim Prattley, who is at CSU at Wagga. And he wrote this here on the right, review into agricultural education in New South Wales for the New South Wales government in 2013. And that's a massive document, really good read. And it goes through all of primary, high school, TAFE, uni, the whole gamut of education and what's happening with agriculture and what needs to change to actually improve it. And so I just contacted him out of the blue mid last year and went down to Wagga to meet him, and he offered to be a supervisor for me for PhD, which I was very honored about. And basically I'm kind of, you know, he's probably the best person I can think of to have as a supervisor for that, given his background. And so I'm doing a PhD by publication, and the first paper I've kind of finished, and it's kind of here, but it's basically the summary of what the talk I just gave you, which I gave at UNE in December as well. And so that's in the process of getting published at the moment. The next part of the PhD is working with other schools. So I'm kind of in the middle of the ethics approval at the moment. And that means, well, it's taken quite a while, of course, the ethics approval, but I'm nearly there. And so I'm planning on working with 4 high schools in Sydney. So 2 public schools, 2 independent schools. And all of these schools are going to be in Sydney in an urban context. They have current ag programs. They're also all in the upper end of the higher SES scores. And basically the reason I chose that is because I'm not trying to, you know, the research is not trying to convince students that weren't going to go to university to go to university. The research is looking at what does it take for students that want to go to university anyway to choose ag. Like what do they need to know to kind of fill those important roles that we've been talking about. So that's kind of what I'm going to do for the research part of this. And so, as I mentioned, the ethics approval is in progress. It's really about kind of implementing a similar idea to what we've been doing, with a focus on year 11 and 12 and improving the academic side of things. And so the measurement out of that will be things like enrolments in the subject HSC results, and also the reputation of the subject. What are students that don't do it in that school think about it now, after it's had a change kind of way of doing it. And so beyond that, like, it's only early days. I'm kind of 6 months into a theoretically 6 to 8 year part-time PhD, but you know, other things I want to do is a bit more research into what is it that year 11 and 12 students are really looking for? And when it comes to agriculture, what is it that kind of motivates them to choose that? Because we know it's needed. And also this is an idea I got from Dave Randall, and kind of maybe developing that. But looking at how you peg kind of the reputation of agriculture as a subject against other subjects in a school, to make it a little bit less subjective and relevant to each school. So, you know, subjects like biology have a pre-existing kind of reputation academically in a school. It's going to be different in different schools depending on the nature of the students and the background of the students. But I think comparing agriculture in a school to that, to biology, for example, and seeing what happens and that kind of thing is an idea for now. And then lots of other things that I haven't even thought of yet down the track. So that's basically what I'm doing. And yeah, the PhD pretty much dovetails off what I've been doing at school as well. So it makes it easy time-wise as well. So that's pretty much it from me. And I'm happy to take any questions, Luciano. And Georgie's happy to take questions too.
All good. If you've got a question, you can either write it in the chat area or speak up. Does anyone have any questions?
Luciano, can I jump in if that's okay?
Yes, certainly.
It's Alicia here from WA. How are you going, everybody? Great job, Scott, and what you've done is just really, it's really great and parallel to a lot of the work that we're doing over here. And thanks for the shout out for the research as well, because it was actually quite a critical piece of information, and it looks like it's really led to a change of thinking across systems and sectors. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good.
Yeah. Look, just really impressed with that presentation. Thank you so much, because as you know, over here in WA, we have a very specialised system. So we are actually looking at recruiting the very schools that you are working in. So that is, you know, the rooftop gardens and the, you know, the little plot, rather than our emphasis, which has been on commercial sites, farms in Western Australia. Do a fantastic job with those kids, but we reach a relatively small proportion of students. And of course, this space is something that should be a mainstream subject for every student, as we all advocate for. So yep. Thank you for that. Just a clarification I made in the chat box about the numbers. Okay. We've never had ATAR enrolments for our agriculture courses above 100 in there. This is the 10th year that they'll be examined.
Yep.
So just the clarification, and it was because they were double counted because we have to split 2 subjects. Okay. But in actual fact, they are the same kids. So yep. Just that they're actually lower than that. They're about probably sitting about 50 every year.
Okay, thanks for that. I might chat to you after.
Sure.
Email you about it.
Thank
you. Be helpful for later. Yeah, thanks.
Scott, it's Cameron Archer here. I was interested to hear about your system of just having animals on site at certain times for 2 terms. I think one of the criticisms or for school administrators in schools is the cost of agriculture and the commitments of resources. And it seems to me that what you've done at Barker is a bit more targeted and a bit more effective than running animals all year round. And I'd just like you to say a bit more about that if you could.
Yeah, I think like a lot of ag teachers, one of the hardest aspects of the job is animals, you know, and looking after animals and all the time that goes into that and that kind of thing. And I know, like, speaking for us anyway, we have, and especially when we've got these type of students who are, you know, academic, you know, they've got an academic inclination, like they want to do they want to have stuff to do with the sheep and that kind of thing. But a lot of them, once they've done it for a little while, they're kind of over it. You know, you can't take them down there every week all year because they'll just kind of get over it. So I don't think we don't need it any longer than we have it. And also the type of students that we have don't necessarily want it either. Like, it's just, we fulfill all the stuff we need to, all the outcomes, you know, with the minimal amount of wasted time in terms of looking after animals. And I think that just allows us to put more of a focus onto other things. Because I know, you know, I know hearing from people that look after animals year round, like the amount of time and effort and energy, it just drains people, you know? And so I guess I'm lucky that I don't have that. And then I can redirect those energies into other things in a subject, you know, whether it be, you know, academically or resource wise or whatever. I think that's been really beneficial. So I would never go back. Like we never had it at Barker when I was there, but we did at my school that I went to, but I'd never go back to doing it that way again. Cause like, it just takes away from so many other things for like not enough gain. There's not enough gain there, I don't think, having them over Christmas and having them whatever, like for us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I commend you on what you're doing, and good luck with PhD. And I think that's another area you need to look at in terms of the economics of both in terms of money and people's times in running a school agriculture program. I've always wondered about that from afar in schools, and also your issue about showing. I think that's also a debate that needs to be had. I understand why people do that, but it's another debate that probably needs to be had because it's a pretty major thing for schools. So I think what you're doing is great. Good luck with the PhD, and I appreciate, as chair of PIEFA, I appreciate you spending your time talking to our people this evening.
No worries, thanks for having me. I think the same thing with showing, like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time spent on it, and you know, I think different schools have to decide in their own scenario what they want to do, but like I wouldn't want to spend the time on it myself. And I think if we got seen as agriculture about showing animals on our school Facebook page, and you know, the kids that aren't doing agriculture would just think, oh, agriculture is just going to the show, it's going to the East show and having cattle and stuff, like, and that I think our subject numbers would drop, like from what we have, definitely, if that happened.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that, but that debate really needs to be had, really, because it's fairly well ingrained in the DNA of delivery of agriculture in schools, and for various reasons it is. But I think it needs to be talked about a bit more. But especially the lower, from having run an institution, you're always looking at numbers and costs, and if you can reduce the costs and get a better result or the same result, well, when you're administrator, that's what you do. So I think that thing about not having animals all year round is a really big deal, and I think at times it can be a bit of a hobby for some to have that operating in a situation, and that's a bit of an extreme statement, but I just think you just need to look at that, and it's refreshing to hear that, and keep at it and keep analysing what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I think
anyway, thanks very much.
I think there's a couple of reasons why, like, showing still a thing. Like, historically, you know, it's just always been done, but also I feel like there's some aspect where people think it's the way to encourage, to get students attracted to the subject. But I think there's another way. Like, I don't think it's a way to attract students to the subject, or it'll attract some students, but I think you could attract so many more with a different reputation.
I think your emphasis on academic rigour, you didn't mention STEM a lot, but I'm sure you've talked about it a lot. I think I've always been disappointed that we as agriculturalists and primary industries have never been able to crack the STEM area as well. Luch is now giving it a fair shot, and but in the past, in the last 5 or nearly 10 years, I've been associated with STEM through not directly through education, but through administrative things. I think the STEM area needs a lot of work from an agricultural point of view, and I think, dare I say it, the COVID era and this whole thing about this epidemiology and a virus and the ecology of a virus and where it's going and why it's going and how it's going and who's getting it, its impact. It's all about biology. This whole thing, crisis we're in, is about biology, and agriculture is a form of applied biology with a heap of economics thrown in. So I think we need to push the STEM stuff some more, and I'm sure you do. So that's all I'll say, but I think that's really important. And I think the COVID things hopefully will give a bit of a focus on biology rather than just everything else.
Yeah, I mean, STEM, we do at school push STEM pretty hard, and there's a separate iSTEM subject. that students do in year 9 and 10 and might combine it with ag as well. So yeah, it's definitely a thing we talk a fair bit about at school. Yeah.
Indeed. Scott, we've got a question from Kim in the chat area.
Yep. Oh, and I can't say it at the moment. What, can you read it out?
Kim from Compass Agriculture, do you foresee having any involvement in assisting metro schools to commence an ag stream in their curriculum?
Well, I guess, well, my PhD is partly about that, although I'm not working with schools to start ag, but I guess it's about looking at, you know, what model works really well with urban schools. Is it transferable? You know, will it work elsewhere? And then I guess from that, you could probably potentially pitch it to schools to start ag as well. I mean, I'm happy to, you know, I'm happy to help people out if they ask for help or want to know about things or whatever, in terms of starting ag. But I guess yeah, like at the moment, my PhD is what I'm kind of working on as a side project rather than going out and advocating publicly to many places at the moment. But yeah, I think, I don't know if I've answered the question, but the PhD is kind of my current thing that I'm working on in that area. But it's just not quite on the getting it into new schools that aren't doing ag already kind of thing. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All right. No one else there. If anyone has any questions specifically for Scott, can they make contact with you? Your email address is on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just email me.
Yes.
Fine.
So, so any last comments from you, Scott?
No. Thanks for having me, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and yeah, I'm happy to chat to anyone if they want to ask questions.
No, I really appreciate your time tonight, Scott, and to share with us the story of Barker and agriculture, as well as your PhD research, which PIEFA will be following with great interest, and also assist you along the way in terms of anything that we can do to support you on such important research. And I'd also like to thank everyone for participating tonight to join in on our second PIEFA conference, PIEFA Forum, here on the wonderful world of Zoom. So thank you to everybody for coming along tonight. Really appreciate it. And take care.
Thanks.
Thanks.